Okay, welcome to today's live stream on doing the arranging for Profundo. All the material should be was already in the handout from last week. So if you don't have that, go to the intro and PDF page. I should probably just copy over a link for that too. So let me do that real quick, just so you have it. And there were some typos which Todd very generously proofed and posted to me, but I didn't get a chance to put them in. They were all for the improvisation section. So I just went through and proofed myself. Didn't find anything terrible in the arranging section, but I will probably publish one more version of it before the end of the month, just so we can have like a totally clean or cleaner version. But here is the link to the page with the PDF, and just move a couple things around here and we'll get started. I'll pull up the notation and tab and we'll get rolling. Get to the first vamp here. Okay, and here we go. All right, so this is the arranging scheme that we're using, the 7-step arc. The idea that, you can take the things we've worked on so far, like a single vamp and the fundamental version and the embellished version, and with the addition of and the improvisation represented here by the solo, and by adding in just a couple of extra elements, maybe a different vamp, and this thing called the shout chorus, which I will explain for anybody new, you can then build this 7-step arrangement that has this arc to it that like starts and grows and builds and reaches sort of a peak and then winds down. And some of the elements are sort of interchangeable, and this is by no means the only way to do it. It's just a starting point. And if you are not through the embellished version yet, if you're not improvising yet, a couple of alternatives, especially with a longer tune, a 16-bar tune like Profundo. One of the simplest things you can do is just play a 5-part sequence where you play an intro or vamp, maybe the vamp from the first week, and you do that, and then you play the fundamental, and then you return to the vamp, play the fundamental one more time, and then go out on the vamp. And so that can be like a really satisfying structure. Instead of just playing the fundamental through a couple of times, you now have this other section and you can alternate with. So that makes a nice, simple 5-part structure. If you have the embellished down, then you can do intro fundamental, or vamp fundamental, vamp embellished, and vamp out. And then if you have a solo, if you've like taken one of the written out solos and learned it, you don't have to necessarily improvise, but you can use the solo as a contrasting section. And so you could do the vamp, and then you could play, say, the embellished, go back to the vamp, play the solo, come back to the embellished, and vamp out. That would make for 6 parts, and it would also make a very satisfying solution. So you don't have to do this complete 7-step process to get started with creating a more complete arrangement of the tune based on whatever you've been able to learn so far this month. So I just want to put that out there parenthetically as another way to think about doing this. So just a few definitions here. The vamp can also function as an intro, and all a vamp is a chord progression that either rocks between 2 chords or forms a short cyclical progression of 4 chords maybe. So this opening vamp that I chose to do this time, which I've notated and we're going to get to in just a minute, that's really just going between an E minor 7 and you can either think of this as an E minor 6 chord, or really I think of it more as an A7 chord with an E in the bass. So you're just rocking between those 2 chords, or you could make a vamp out of the 1-6-2-5 that we're using in the embellished version. The original vamp that we did, vamp number 1 in the first week, is just 3 chords, C7, B7, and E. The point is that it's cyclical, and it does not have to come, it's invented. It comes outside of the actual tune itself. So it doesn't have to follow the same rules as the chord progression for the tune. It's something we're adding to the tune, and so there's room for a certain amount of flexibility and creativity. Now the base of a vamp could be a pedal point, like this one. A pedal point means that it stays on the root or on a particular note, usually the root. And so here we're keeping this pedal point, this E, underneath both the E minor 7 and the A chord. Or it could move with the progression, like this one does, going from C to B to E. In terms of the voicings, the chords that are chosen, you can have either a common tone, meaning maybe keeping, like if you kept this one note on top throughout both chords, and you keep hearing the same note on top, that's a common tone, as opposed to a guide tone, which is more an idea of having something, really the guide tone line here, the thing that your ear follows through the chord progression, is this descending line. And that's the top of the C7 chord, the top of the B7 chord, and then the flat third of the E minor, and then down to the root. So your ear wants to follow that line that guides your ear through the chord progression. And then in terms of the groove, you can either keep the quarter note pulse going if you're playing a steady bass tune, or you might have an ostinato, which is a short repeated rhythm, for example. And we'll do a couple of things that have an ostinato. So those are the things we're going to be using to create these vamps. So here's the one we had the first week. And so it has a guide tone line. Like I said, it's also, you can think of it as blues licks, right? Just using the E blues scale over this chord progression and that bass line. So here's an ostinato. Here's a different way we could do this. I'll play it first and then kind of go back and explain. So we have And so in context, I probably played that too fast, right? But if you were coming back from playing through the B section, and I should point out that in this case, and for many of these examples, both the vamps and the shout choruses, you might not wait till the end of the 16th bar to start them, because the tune ends, here's the second half of the tune, right? So, we're really starting a 2-bar vamp. So there's no reason you couldn't start in bar 16, doing your shout chorus, doing your vamp. I'm just move this around, or else I couldn't see comments here for a minute. So let me just tweak that. Yeah, so you might start, so you'd be coming back. So here you are. Here's the lick. Here's where bar 15 would start, and you could just go. Good question here from Ben. Hello, Ben. What is the time in the ostinato vamp 2? It is still 4/4. It's just got a lot of syncopation. So I won't even try. If I try to count this out, I'll probably fall all over myself. But 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So if you want, just pencil in the count underneath. It's still just 4 eighth notes, counting 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So make your own little horizontal 3-step, right? Like write out the 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and maybe make some circles around where you're pinching, which is everywhere. So you're pinching on 1, and then you're pinching on the and of 2. So 1 and 2 and 3, and you're pinching on the 4. And then this is by itself, and this is on beat 3 and beat 4. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Wait a second. I knew I'd get in trouble. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So there's a lot of syncopation, but if you slow it down, break it down, it's just, offbeats and onbeats, just pinches and not. So yeah, it's got the same, like a bossa nova, it's got that same, accenting on the ands and that kind of thing. So that's one option, one new option. And again, you could drop that in a couple of bars early at the end of the form, whether you're soloing or playing the melody. Here are a couple more possibilities. So here is the one that I played during the intro. And this is more of a steady bass and a pedal point on the bottom. And I'm using these two voicings, just an E minor 7 with the root, flat, third, and flat 7, and then going to an A7 with the 5th and the bass. So here would be the 5th, the flat 7, and the 3rd. So I'll try to calm down and breathe. I get really wound up talking about this stuff, but then I start explaining things too fast. Here we go. So E minor 7 to A7 over E, and so it's a steady bass. And it's basically the same thing. The second 4 bars are the same as the first 4 bars, except you drop the bass an octave, which is where a lot of the impact comes from, to feel that bass suddenly come in an octave lower. So this is a kind of floaty, more delicate thing. Let's see, there's a high string in there. So again, syncopation, but the bass is grounded on the strong beats, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And so you're grabbing a pinch, index, middle, and ring on strings 5, 4, and 3, and then going down to the open B string, and then changing the voicing slightly, right, to this note, pinching, and now going to the high string, and then coming in on the and of 4 with the first voicing again, back to the E minor 7. So again, there's those syncopations and coming into measure 2, and 1, and 2, and 3, 4. So very syncopated here, and then it straightens out in the back half of the second measure. And that repeats. Then it's the exact same thing, except the thumb drops to the low string. This is left blank, so you have room to do the pickup. But really, it's just these two measures. If you can get that idea and that syncopation down, it repeats in this measure, it goes on in this measure with the low bass, and then it repeats one more time, leaving some space for the pickup. You could just keep playing through this, just like it was here, if you were going to play this more than one time all the way through. So that's vamp number 3. And finally, here's an ostinato. So this is more of that octave stuff. We had this a month or two ago, and it was fun, and I thought it'd be nice to do another one, just so you get more chance to practice this idea. So the bass is going. Right, so the same simple idea 3 times, just going up from E to G to A, just right up the pentatonic scale. But again, syncopated. And yet, very similar syncopation, right? 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Right? So if you can start getting some of these syncopations into your head, they look hard and they sound tricky, but they are, at least in this set of exercise, this set of, arranging ideas, it's a lot of this, it's some of the same syncopations over and over again. And you can build a vocabulary of syncopations. You can get familiar with certain kinds of rhythms that come up so that when you see and hear them, you're like, oh yeah, one of those, right? So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So what's going on top is we're doing octaves and then a chord and then a lick with a bass note. So we've got octave, octave between the 6th and 3rd string, chord, thumb, index, and middle on the root, 5th and root of A, and then over to this blues lick, which is just that, with a pull off, but, so here's one more octave, right? So here's the last octave, pinch between the 5th and the 2nd string, and then repeat. Oh, I'm sorry, it's not just an octave on the G, it's actually the octave and the 3rd above. I missed that. Right, so 2nd and 3rd string. And then this is a slightly truncated version of that. Flat 7 and root of B. Then we repeat the first 2 measures. And then this is the tricky part. So we're going from the flat 5 octave, a pair of B flats, over to the E, back to A, G. So the lick on top sounds like, and then we're doubling everything. also start by just doing the bass, or before trying to put it all together. And then, so you're coming out of the, again, you could start this one a couple of beats early, you know, a couple of bars early in bar 15 of the form. So, back in. So it makes a great change up to what's going on. Okay, so those are vamps. And the vamp can go, you can use it at the beginning of the tune to start things off. You can use it in the middle as a kind of punctuation when you're coming back from the melody. You can use it you know, at the end of a solo to kind of tread water, catch your breath, and create a little space. You can use it as the outro to the tune. And if you do use it as the outro, you can use it for longer, right? You could sit on this. Right? You could tag that last part. But there's different ways you can kind of move that stuff around. But once you've got the vamps, or once you're trying, you pick a, you know, you don't have to do all of them. You know, you can pick the one that you like the best and just work on that. Because you only need one, right? I mean, you can have more than one, but it provides a certain kind of continuity to use the same vamp for the intro, middle, and ending vamp. Alternatively, I'd suggest maybe if you want to do two vamps, do, Don, you're way ahead of me. Yes, exactly. If you're going to use more than one vamp, I'd recommend using one vamp for the intro and outro and a different vamp in the middle to break things up. But I think it makes a nice bookend. You can do what you want. You know, you can use as many vamps as you like. I always just want to make it clear, like, you don't have to learn all of them. You do not have to eat the whole elephant, as it were. Just pick one that you like to start with. And if you get that one down quickly, or you get to a point where you're comfortable with it and you want to add another one in, great. I mean, ultimately, the idea would be to have a vocabulary of vamps, and that becomes an improvisational element as well, where you can choose on the fly, oh, I think I like this one. But there's also, it makes perfect sense to go, well, this is my arrangement. I'm going to use this vamp at the beginning. I'm going to use this vamp at the end. I'm going to use this vamp in the middle. So, oh, good. That answers your question, I guess. All right, so let's talk about the shout chorus. Now, the shout chorus, if you've been around here for a while, you know, but if you're new, I will explain. The shout chorus comes from 30s and 40s jazz. It's the moment in a big band or even a small arranged group where to provide a kind of climax to the tune, after the solos, everybody plays together. Or as a way of setting up a final soloist, you might have everybody playing ensemble for 4 bars and then someone answering by soloing for 4 bars. In the sense that we're using it, you know, it could be, it's to have a landing spot that you're aiming towards in your solo arrangement. The great jazz guitar player Gene Bertoncini liked to say that having a good arrangement was like a safety net, that there were nights when the improvising was great and there were nights when the improvising was maybe not so great. But if you had a good arrangement, you know, at least, you know, you weren't going to completely disappoint the audience. Like, you had some stuff worked out, some stuff you'd thought about ahead of time, some things you could count on. And having a shout chorus is part of having an arrangement you can count on, because even if the solo's kind of meh, you didn't quite get where you wanted to, the shout chorus can be this like concluding moment that's cool and exciting and that you know you can play because you've practiced it. And again, if you're not improvising yet, it doesn't matter. You can still use the shout chorus as a climactic moment in the song. You can use it as a kind of variation on the melody, which is really, you know, a really good way for it to function. Just like you can use a prepared solo as a variation on the melody. So there's a lot of ways you can use this material even if you're not comfortable improvising yet. So some guidelines for the shout chorus. Unlike the vamp, it is part of the tune. It follows the form. It's a way of going through the chord progression. So you kind of have to stick to the form, to the chord progression, to the number of bars, all that. The bass, likewise, is going to move with the chord progression. It's rare to do a pedal point kind of thing. We're going to also stick to basically a quarter note groove and stick to our steady bass. But here's where there can be some variety. We can use common tone voicings. We can use guide tone lines. We can do passing chords, chords that aren't necessarily part of the original chord progression, and chord substitutions, as long as they make sense and help connect the basic skeleton of the chords that are already there. So let's take a look at a few shout choruses for Profundo. Now, all of these are 8 bars long, and they would replace the first 8 bars, or the A section, to Profundo. And you could then you would play these first 8 bars, whatever the shout chorus is, and then go into the B section, the back half of the tune. On the way in just now to this live stream, I actually played a shout chorus twice through and then went to the B section, which isn't exactly wrong, but it kind of violates that idea of the shout chorus as an embellishment of the form. So my bad. My advice is to use these to swap these in for the A section and conclude them by going into the B section, whether you're going to repeat the melody to the B section or whether you're going to improvise on the B section. So here is the first one, and this basically echoes one of the vamps that we had, the octave vamp that we had. So the idea is this would slowly build dynamically and in intensity, right? Because if you look at the top line, it's just a slowly climbing blues lick. And for some reason, I put this one first. It's the trickiest of the 3. So if this one is making your head explode, don't sweat it. It's just an idea that builds on one of those vamps. And it's more octave stuff, right? So, and again, same syncopation. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. I wonder if this is actually a clave rhythm. That's why it sounds Latin, because it's a clave rhythm. I didn't even realize that. So da, 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 da. That's like the central, rhythm to like a lot of Caribbean and South American stuff. So bonus points for a little ethnomusicology along the way, accidental as it was. All right, so here's what we have. So so there's the melody kind of concluding at the end. An A chord, a B7, and an E minor. Right? So again, you just have to sort of slowly work out each little move. This is actually kind of a variation on an exercise my guitar teacher gave me in high school, which was this ridiculous chromatic exercise. I don't even know if I remember how to do it. The idea is just, one finger per fret, right? And so it's practice putting that sort of as finger assignment together. But this is sort of built along the same lines. So take it with a grain of salt. It would come in, again, in bar 15. So those chords at the end, so those sound really huge. All right, so that's shout number one. Again, and it leaves space at the end. So, right, so, and there's this lick, but that could easily be replaced with going back into the melody, right? If this was the last thing you did before repeating the melody. Okay, on to shout number two. This one's a little more civilized. It's, again, this is based on more of a straight, like just a quarter note pulse, but the pulse is kind of divvied out. A lot of it's on top here. So, and the bass is kind of a halftime feel. So anyway, here's what it sounds like. I'll break it down afterwards. 1, 2, 3. Now, these also sound kind of like vamps because the first half of the tune is pretty vamp-like, right? You're sitting on E almost the whole time, or you're walking through the 1, 6, 2, 5. But what's going on here is we've got this, again, another blues lick. Syncopation again, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, right? But so we've got this halftime bass. With a syncopation at the end. So you put it together. So, again, that one leaves you space to come back into the tune again. But, this one, I think I would finish the full 16 bars. What's a proper tempo? Sorry, one more time. So finally, shout chorus number 3 takes the same idea up an octave. And then puts it over the 1, 6, 2, 5, or actually 1, 6, and then tritone substitution for the 2 to 5, right? E, C sharp 7, C7 to B, and then puts that blues lick up an octave on top of that. So again, you could look at just the bass, again in kind of a halftime feel. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then on top, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, 2. And there are a couple of notes on the inner strings to fill it out. Index finger on the 3rd string to fill out the C7 chord, C sharp 7 chord. Again now to get the 3rd string on the C chord, and again on the B chord. It's always on the downbeat with the thumb. Sharp minor 7, B7, sharp 9, with the syncopation. And these 2 bars are exactly the same as these 2 bars. And this bar is the same as this one, so this is just a little variation. So once you get this idea down, you kind of got the majority of what's happening here. And so again, in context, this one you might want to finish out the 16 bars also. So sorry. And then you're back into the B section. And so on. So those are all the different ideas that you can add in. I had a couple of specific questions come in on the forum, and so I'm going to go grab those, and if you have questions as well, put them in the chat here, and I will be glad to answer those as well. But let's see. Go into these questions. Let's see. Okay. Okay. Question from Ricky. Hey, Ricky, I know you're out there. Can you go over a couple of solo ideas for coming out and back of shout course number 2? Okay. Yeah. Good. And then there was a question from Peter about intervals. When you mention intervals, I'm not always sure if it's the chord involved or the key of the piece. Can you verify? It seems to me the chord being played. I'm trying to think about the context. Oh, I already answered the question about shout chorus 2. Oh, perfect. Great. Okay, let me try to answer this question about intervals. When I'm talking about intervals, if I say like the 1, the 4, the 5, the 2, the 6, the 7, like without a, like an interval like is like a 7th or a 2nd or a 5th, right? So that means a specific distance, right? This note is the 7th of E. This note is a 7th up from the root of E. These notes are a 6th apart. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so sixths. When they end in whatever that thing is, I don't know what the grammatical term is, like, you know, but a 6th, THS, or a 2nd, ND, or a 3rd, RDS, right? 3rds, 6th, 7ths, those are intervals. But the 5 is short for the 5 chord. The 7 is short for the 7 chord, the chord that is 7 notes up from the root, right? So 1 chord, 6 chord, 2 chord, 5 chord. Now this is a little bit tricky because the 5 chord is built on the 5th degree of the E, of the key of E, right? But the 5th of the 5 chord is the note F sharp, right? Because if we're on the 5 chord, the root of the 5 chord in this key, E, the root of the 5 chord is B, and the 5th note up from the root is F sharp, but that note is the 5th of the 5 chord. So it gets a little confusing, and it's a perfectly reasonable question, which I hope that explanation somewhat answers. When it's written out, it's much easier, right? Because we use Roman numerals for chords. So when I say the 5 chord, I'm picturing like a Roman numeral 5 if I'm picturing something. If I say the 2 chord, I'm picturing a little lowercase Roman numeral 2. But if I say the 6th or the 3rd, I mean like, you know, the number 3, like, you know, 3RD or 6TH for 6th, you know. So that's kind of what that's about. So hopefully that makes it a little clearer. But I realize that listening to it is not maybe as clear as seeing it. So if that does not completely answer the question and you're not here in the chat but watching later, then please post again on the forum and we'll try to get it squared away. Okay, question from Christian. I practice to play the bass and add some solo melody over it. Okay, but what's the secret of the middle strings? How do I include the G string properly for what kind of voicings? Okay, cool. That is totally valid and reasonable question. My best suggestion is to, I mean, let's look at a specific example, right? So in the tune, let me pull this back up. In the actual arrangement itself, let's go back to the actual fundamental embellished arrangement, right? So when we get to the B section here, let's see if we can kind of make some rules about this from what we see. So allowing for some syncopation and where things land, the middle voice is rounding things out sort of when it's an important note on top, right? When it's a strong beat or when it's kicking off a new chord. So the inner voice is there, the note on the middle string, on the 3rd string, is there for emphasis. So listen to the difference. If we played versus so two things are going on. We're hearing that inner voice when we're changing chords. So we need more definition, right? Because if you just hear the bass and the melody, it's not as much definition as if we get that inner voice in. It helps to tell us, oh yeah, okay, it's a 7th chord. It's giving more shape and more information. So at the chord change, so downbeats or anticipated downbeats like this one on the end of 4, where we're basically getting to the chord a little early on top before the bass comes in, that's one place to definitely do it. And then here, you know, let's see. I mean, here we're going through, you know, in this case, the inner voice is helping to define this more elaborate bass line, right? So here, the inner voices are not part of the melody. They're part of the accompaniment. We're basically trying to do 3 things at once here. Keep a bass going, play the melody, and then also be an accompanist that's saying, oh yeah, these are the chords that are happening. It's kind of a call and response. answering the melody, and it's also, again, giving more information, more than the bass on its own would give. So far we're basically saying inner voices when you need to provide more context, more information than the melody and the bass will provide. So let's go back and look at this in terms of improvising. And I have to admit, I'm kind of winging it here because this is a really good question, but I am kind of thinking out loud about how this would work. So if I was improvising, and let's say I was just playing on the A section, I'd be doing this call and response thing we talked about, right? But if I was, so that's where my additional inner voices are going to come as answers to the single note, which is a lot like the vamp we just talked about with the 1-6-2-5. But if that was not the case, and I was not doing those double stops, where would I stop to put in an inner voice? Those notes ring out so that I could hear two notes instead of one. Right, so there, that's the flat third that I'm going for. That sounds fuller than. Right, so I'm going to harmonize it. And again, it's at the landing point on the strong beat. Now that could just be, but I'm thinking, well, I kind of want to emphasize the sound if I'm kind of implying like an A chord and back. So again, strong beat, so I'm going up to the fifth. So I'm harmonizing the fifth. It's a little bit easier than trying to grab a whole chord, and it provides some volume and depth. But I'm finessing this one. I'm not going up, I'm just grabbing the double stop and getting the melody, because this is the strong beat. So that's one way it might happen. And then another way it might happen in the second section, right? Now here we've already got this scheme of playing the melody always with an inner voice. So I might take that and think, well, if I'm going to play blues licks over this descending chord sequence, so I'm just grabbing the inner voice where I can that goes with the chord. And grab it going for this note, it's the 9th of the C. I'm grabbing the root and then the flat 7 below it on the B7. Here's the root and the flat 7, I'm filling it out. Maybe I'd grab the flat 7 here. Flat 7 and the third. But again, it's strong beats. It's, it's pairing that inner voice with either the thumb or the fingers on top. Here with the fingers. Here's thumb, index, and ring. Fingers. These are all on the and. Most of those are on the and of 4, right? So they're anticipating the next strong beat. So it's a way of playing on it's not really playing on the downbeat, but it's thinking ahead to what would be happening on the downbeat, if that makes any sense. Okay, I hope that explains Christian's question somewhat. Okay, here's a couple different people talking about, let's do this question, and then if there's nothing else super pressing, we'll wrap it up. But let's see. From Rob. Hey, Rob. I'm having a few problems with the double pull-off in bar 14. How do you count out a substitute for it, and do you have any tips to practice it? And then from Jim. I, too, am having the same issues. Seem to be getting the hang of it by practicing the 14th bar with a very slow metronome beats. My main problem, more clarification. My main problem is getting my fingers around to the 3rd and 4th string so I can pull off. So are you talking about during the, in the melody, in the embellished version? I'm going to assume that's so, but put a follow-up in if that's not the case. And let me see. Oh, let me pull the tab back up. Sorry. So this section right here, presumably. And now let me look at what the questions are about it again. Getting my fingers around to the 3rd and 4th string so that I can pull off. Let's see. So where are we coming from? Okay, good. The melody. So we're coming from here. I'm using my middle finger, my ring finger, and then open high string, thumb, index, and ring over here in measure 13. Here's the double stop. Bringing the middle finger over, and then this is open. And now we've got to get to so I'm using my index finger as the default for the 3rd string for the first set of pull-offs, and then I'm just dragging it over to the next string to do the 4th string as well, unless I might be using my thumb. But I think the point is more the pull-offs, right? It sounds like it's more of a fretting hand issue. So pull-offs are tricky as far as getting enough strength into them that you're making the notes happen without having too much input over here. So you might want to you're going to want to have both fingers down right away, the ring finger and the middle finger, and practice the pull-off. And I've mentioned this elsewhere, and I think Ricky's got an index of like guitar techniques where like he's made an index of like 10 or 12 specific locations in various live streams where there's a specific technique discussion, and this is probably one of them, but I'm happy to go over it again. You want to make sure that you're pulling a bit to the side, not just lifting. If you just lift, you don't get a lot of volume. It's almost like, well, it is like you're plucking by pulling off in this direction with the finger that's leaving the fretboard. So you should be able to get at least some kind of sound without even involving your picking hand, where you're pulling off to the side and sounding that note. And then the same thing here. And that's a way to practice it. And also the fact that the underside of this finger is touching the 2nd string, which is why hopefully it doesn't sound like, well, I can't even do it, but you don't want to get, if you're not touching the underside of the 2nd string, which happens, you don't really have to try to do it. It's going to happen because that's just what your fingers are going to do. But this one, you're going to get a little bit of noise. You're going to get some of the B string. But this one, you shouldn't hear much because you're pulling off into a damp string. And then you want to practice that pull off. And then you want to practice this pull off. And for this one, it's pulling off, it's basically pulling the string to the side. I mean, there's no time to think about this when you're really doing it, but if you slow it down, you can work on these things a bit. And don't stress if it doesn't sound good right away, because it's gonna take time. But you want to pull like feel that pressure of pulling against the string, but really, in this case, you're kind of pulling and then lifting straight off. Because once you've pulled the string slightly to the side, when you lift off, you are going to get that pluck. Whereas if you go completely to the side afterwards on your way off the string, you're going to get all that. So it's really a matter of creating some tension, like pulling down on it and then lifting straight off so that you don't drag along a lot of these guys. So together, and then same thing over here, pulling to the side and lifting off. And you can exaggerate that by just hearing the sound of the note going sharp and then lifting straight off, which will pluck the string. And you can sit there and just try to do that, hammering on to make the note, pulling off, hammering on, pulling off, and those are some things you can work on just to start getting that. And then it's a matter of the timing and getting your fingers to where they belong at the right moment. Okay, I hope that helps. Let me play through the tune one more time. It's about 3:30. I don't want to keep anybody too long because I know it's late where some of you guys are, some of you people are. But I'd be happy to play through the tune one more time so you can see some of these things in action. So let me do that. And if you do have any last thoughts or questions, post them while I'm playing. And otherwise, if you're watching this on replay or you have a question afterwards, even though you've been here, put it in the chat. We won't have a live stream next week, but the week, let me check the calendar. I think the week after that will be right into the next tune. I'm going to double check that and see. Hang on. I think we'll be into July next. Let's see. This is the 16th. Yeah, nothing next week. And then I think we're going to start our next tune on the 30th. Yeah, I think that's what's going to happen. Next month's tune, I am pleased to say I can tell you that now. One of the things that I got from the feedback in the survey, which I apologize for not publishing yet and posting, because I'm happy to show everybody what everybody else was thinking. But I was really curious about, I've been doing a lot of steady bass because it's very more conducive to improvisation, but there was a lot of emphasis on having a little bit more of a balance. Many people said they would like to have, they were as interested in the alternating thumb as the steady bass. So next month we're going to do an alternating thumb arrangement of Rollin' and Tumblin'. So just a little preview. So it's kind of a synthesis of like the Muddy Waters melody and the slide melody, and then having that alternation between the single note melody and then that kind of vamp in between. So it's like it's like I don't know how many bars, it's like a 30 bar blues or something like that with all those, because the vamp goes on forever in the middle. But that gives you all this room to improvise. see about doing an alternating thumb tune that wasn't necessarily like in a bright key like C. So it'll be interesting. But that kind of covers a few different bases. So that's what we'll be doing next month. And then there's some other alternating thumb things that we'll be. I'm just gonna try to fold them into the mix a little bit more. Oh, well, here's an easy question from Swami. Can you post what pickup system you use? Honestly, I am not using pickups right now. I'm using microphones. And so the secret to the sound is that I'm actually using the microphones and the preamps that I slowly acquired over several years of recording. And so I finally figured out a way to stream using my good microphones and my good preamps. So to be completely transparent and nerdy about it, I am using overhead, and you can't, I wish there was a way to show you this stuff. Maybe I'll figure out a way to do that in the future. But I'm using a Lauten large diaphragm microphone called a 387 and a small diaphragm Neumann KM184, which is a reissue of the old Neumann KM84. And the Lauten is going into a Shadow Hills mono preamp, and the Neumann is going into a Universal Audio Solo 610. And then there's no compression. Those are going straight into an old Apogee Symphony 2-channel interface, and then that's hitting the computer. So it took a long time to sort of dial that in, and so that's where the sound is coming from. I do use pickups live. I don't use this guitar live anymore, but it has a Fishman system in it. So this is a Crown mini microphone, and there's a saddle pickup in here, like a flat piezo Fishman pickup. The one that I use, the setup I use for playing live is I have my Collins, which I've used in a few videos. It's in all the TrueFire stuff because I would fly with the Collins, and I didn't want to fly with the Martin. So I would take the Collins to Florida to shoot the TrueFire stuff. So the Collins is a 002H. It's a rosewood back and sides. This is a mahogany guitar, and that has a K&K pickup in the bridge, and then it has a Fishman Rare Earth, which is magnetic, and a microphone, and then those go into a dual input preamp called a Red Eye, which is actually made here in Austin. It's a great live preamp, and then a little bit of delay and reverb with those little tiny what's that Scandinavian pedal company? Anyway, it's the Flashback and the Hall of Fame. I'm blanking on the name of the company that makes those pedals. Anyway, really simple setup, but good pickups set up well by somebody into a reasonably good preamp, and then you're kind of in business. So anyway, let me play through Profundo one more time, and then we'll have next week. You'll have time just to practice and work on stuff, and then we'll get into rolling and tumbling at the beginning of July. So here we go. Here we don't. Hang on, I got to make sure that everything is reasonably visible here. Yes, TC Electronics, thank you. All right. Thanks for being here. I'm going to go work on my shout choruses. That was a little shabby, and I think I actually played one of the vamps from like some song we did 6 months ago instead of the one that I meant to play. But you know what? That's live music for you. Yes, happy Father's Day to anybody out there who is doing the dad thing. And to answer your question, there are no immediate plans to film or stream the show, just because I haven't done it. It's like one of the first shows I've done in like 2 years, and I just thought if I was filming it, I thought about it for about 10 minutes, and when there was no immediately easy solution to getting that done, I just thought, you know what, it'll just make me super uptight to be filming anyway. So I may try to do a live stream in a week or two for anybody not in Austin, just to play some of the songs in the record and you know, hang out and do a little bit of that. So if that happens, I will certainly post all over the membership and let you know that that's happening as well. All right, great to see you all. Thanks for being here. If you're watching on replay, I hope this helps, and I'll see you guys, all of you in the next week or two.